I know I've been covering this new X-Men from the Ashes reboot from Tom Brevoort a lot lately, but the man literally will not shut up. He's going on his Man with the Hat Substack and releasing information. He's going on Adventures in Poor Taste and releasing information. He's going on the Homo Superior podcast and releasing information. And besides that, we're getting all these announcements from Marvel Comics in the form of press releases that are coming out seemingly daily. So we're going to cover it some more because there's some more interesting information. And this time, Tom Brevoort throws some low-key shade at past X-Men writers and creators and books, and also throws a little bit of shade at Jordan White. And I say a tip of the cap. Not the pork pie cap. If I had a baseball cap, maybe, because I wouldn't be caught dead in that stupid hat that Tom Brevoort wears. But to each his own when it comes to stylings. Not everybody gets this great of a head of hair. You know what I'm saying? And I would say, while I do appreciate Tom Brevoort throwing out a little shade at the past X-Men creative endeavors, because I do think they've been lacking for a very, very long time, people residing in glass houses probably shouldn't throw rocks, because his X-Men rollout has been very, very bad. Very little information to get actually excited about. And then if you look at his recent past, even less to get excited about. He hasn't exactly been knocking it out of the park as the group editor of the Avengers for the past decade or so. And when I said he was throwing shade, we'll start out with Brevoort throwing a little bit of shade on his Man with the Hat Substack, and then get into a couple of the really stupid ideas that he's obviously greenlit. I felt like a lot of the X projects over the past several years have felt just a bit random to me, where their cast seemed to have assembled based on who happened to be around and available rather than any relevance to the concept of the series. Roger Stern had a name for books like this, where the characters were bent out of alignment in order to support a concept that wasn't relevant to them. Quote unquote, fake books. And that is a very good way to put it. The old fake book is a problem, not only with Marvel Comics, not only with X-Men, but certainly with the Avengers and DC Comics, to where you take the character and bend them to the will of the story rather than build a story around the character, which is traditionally how you would write a successful comic book. Probably one of the reasons that we have so many unsuccessful comic books lately. And I can see where Mr. Brevoort's coming from, because in the recent past within X-Men, we did have Iceman all of a sudden, after being a heterosexual character for, 50 years, one day he was gay. And he's been gay ever since. And they've been making these Iceman gay books for like 5 or 6 years now. None of them work. None of them have been accepted. Nobody wants to buy the damn things. But they're basically bending the character to the will of the writer rather than the writer building a story up around a great character like Iceman, who's one of the few X-Men characters that could almost kind of carry a solo title. So that was pretty much wasted, and they've destroyed a character on there. And there's been a lot of these examples, obviously, within the X-Men when you had Vita Ayala going on New Mutants. How fucking weird was that? You had Teenie Howard clearly on Captain Britain. Well, Captain Britain needs to be a girl, so we're just going to make Psylocke split her in half and then put Captain Britain on one of the halves of Psylocke. Well, that made a whole lot of sense. And what do they continue doing? Telling that story, even though it failed and failed and failed, and it was failing faster and faster, and they just couldn't give the story up. Really good examples of what Mr. Brevoort are talking about, where they're trying to bend the character around the story itself rather than building a story around the character. And a lot of times with the team dynamics have been really weird as well. Go and look at, was it Steve Orlando's Marauders? Ooh, fucking nightmare that book was. But Mr. Brevoort's Avengers line has had a lot of the same issues. Do you remember Civil War II? I understand doing a sequel to Civil War. Civil War was huge. But now all of a sudden, it's Iron Man versus Captain Marvel. Is it because Captain Marvel's an enormously powerful character that everyone loved and respected, and we're going to be put to the test like, oh my goodness, who should I side with? Which one of my favorite characters? No. They just decided, well, we've made an executive decision that Captain Marvel is Captain America now. So let's put her in this and showcase it, and accidentally portray her as a villain the entire time and not giving anyone a reason to actually root for her. That was under Tom Brevoort's watch. Think about what Jason Aaron did with She-Hulk. That character did not need to be on his Avengers team. Made no sense to be there. Or I guess you got to have a Hulk or whatever. And then he regressed the character 40 years. It was the fucking damnedest thing I've ever seen in my life. Jason Aaron's Avengers run. Not to mention that, what about that 1 million BC Avengers stuff that made no sense and made all the characters and their origins less important? Tom Brevoort greenlit that stuff too, and even let the Avengers and the 1 million BC Avengers and the Avengers Beyond and the Avengers Forever all team up for a book in an event that no one cared about because they were doing exactly what Tom Brevoort is talking about there. They were making fake comic books. Thus, everyone rejected him. So while I do appreciate Tom Brevoort calling out really bad storytelling, he should probably look in the mirror because he's had a part in a ton of really bad storytelling. And I'm just using a very few examples of what Tom Brevoort and Jordan White fucked up in X-Men, and he fucked up in Avengers, obviously. And the next bit of shade from the Man with the Hat Substack that's more directed at Jordan White himself. In the case of X-Men, I wasn't really given much more than we wanted to be moving away from the rapping Krakoan era, and that because the characters were going to be of greater importance to studios in the years to come, it made sense to have a more senior editorial presence overseeing the book. And nobody at all objected with my loudly announcing that the objective of the X line would be to scratch and claw our way back into the top of the sales charts where X-Men had long sat and where it belongs. Oh, I hear you, Tom Brevoort. You fucking throw Jordan White under the bus. Rightfully so, because that guy is a fucking moron. He absolutely destroyed the X-Line. There has never been a point in X-Men history that had so much momentum that was just farted away in like 6 months. I still can't believe that Jordan White was able to squander House of X Powers of 10 in such record time. People should have been able to hold out hope for at least a couple of years before they just admit it's like, fuck, this just really isn't working out. But, you know, the dude did absolutely butcher the line. His editorial oversight absolutely killed the X-Line right where it stood almost the moment that he showed up once Jonathan Hickman was done setting up the new status quo for the X-Men. And so I say good on you, man. Jordan White deserved that fucking evisceration at the hands of Tom Brevoort, talking about how X-Men have long sat at the top of the sales charts, and that's where they belong. And that's the absolute truth. X-Men as a franchise should have 3 top 20 selling books. They're lucky to have 1 at this point. And I don't even know how they're getting that, to be completely honest, because it's been so bad as of late. But they do relaunch tons of #1s with lots of variant covers and all those type of things that Marvel Comics do to artificially inflate the success of a comic book series and line, in bragging that Dan Buckley basically came down to him at the behest of Kevin Feige and saying, hey, you know that Jordan White fucker that's butchering the X-Men line right now? We need to get him out and get somebody with more experience and more success on the line because the X-Men are going to be showing up at Marvel Studios in the MCU soon, and we would like people to have comic books they actually want to read. Will that be the outcome? I'm not really sure, but there's a reason Jordan White isn't taking over as the group editor of Avengers. You remember last time when he got the X-Men gig, he was a group editor at Star Wars, and the guy that took over Star Wars was the group editor on X-Men, and they basically just swapped spots. Now Jordan White's been kicked to the curb because he absolutely sucked and basically promoted so far above his capability that it wasn't even funny. It was laughable at that point that they actually came down and said, you know what, Brevoort, your Avengers line sucks. There's not a lot of success there, but even you would be an enormous step up from fucking Jordan White. And those are the things that we're going to talk about within the Substack. There are a couple of things coming out that make me want to laugh at Tom Brevoort because he did mention, you know, the 9 titles that we announced, there's going to be another 4. And now we know the identity of 2 of those. And we are told a prominent X-Men was going to be moving over to Avengers, which was not all that surprising. Storm will join the cast of Jed MacKay's current Avengers run starting in August. Avengers number 17. The issue will also mark the debut of new series artist Valerio Schiti. Krakoa's tragic fall has made the Avengers realize how vital a mutant voice on the team is, and they'll settle for nothing less than the most prominent and beloved mutant superhero on the planet. Man, I fucking love Storm, but I don't know if that's what I would call her. She's a great character, and certainly we've had X-Men on the Avengers team from time to time, even like way back in the day. I think Beast, he might have been the first X-Men that was on the Avengers. I know Wolverine's been on the Avengers. There's been plenty of X-Men that have been on the Avengers. I think this might be the first time Storm has been an official member. I think it's kind of weird, but also completely predictable. If you haven't been reading what Jed MacKay does, when he's on more than one project, he crosses over all of them. I think it's mostly because he's lazy and he doesn't want to have to come up with multiple storylines. So he just kind of starts like combining them all together so he doesn't have to think too much. And I would be expecting lots and lots of Avengers, X-Men crossovers within the comic books, whether it makes sense or not for the Avengers or the X-Men. Basically fake comic books, as Tom Brevoort was talking about earlier. So that is not a surprise whatsoever. Storm is going to be on the Avengers, and that cover is atrocious. It looks really stupid. It's actually pretty laughable. And I don't think many Avengers fans are going to be like, oh my goodness, I always wanted Storm on the team. And I don't think many Storm fans are like, oh, great, she's on a team, but it's the Avengers. That's where she should be. She shouldn't be on an X-Men team because she would overshadow any other X-Men leader, but put her on a team with Captain Marvel and let Captain Marvel be the leader because she's another female. I guess females can only be subordinate to females now or something stupid like that. Just ridiculous, but completely predictable, as I stated. As far as the other new series, we've got some information. After the reveal of Phoenix, the first new series announcement for X-Men characters are Dazzler and Storm. Storm has been rumored to be receiving a new series for some time, but there have been no rumors about Dazzler receiving a new series. Dazzler, of course, was one of the first mutants to have their own solo series as she launched her own book in the 80s, years before she even joined the X-Men. And I do remember Tom Brevoort stating, yeah, we had to announce these 3 or 4 projects because a lot of people will probably say that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, so you were right, Mr. Brevoort. A Dazzler ongoing solo book. Dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard. Maybe this will be the Celeste Bronfman book, or maybe Titty Howard will make her triumphant return to the X-Men line on that thing. You know, the first Dazzler book, specifically the first issue, did sell a lot, and it was marginally successful over time. Marginally successful is probably overselling it, but it had an enormous amount of success compared to most of what Tom Brevoort's going to be doing now. But Dazzler ain't that character. There's no solo book feature for this character. And that thing it'll be a miniseries or it'll be canceled almost immediately. The Storm book, that hasn't been a rumor. That's been confirmed for a long time. We still don't know who the creators are on Storm, but that will come out this week. I don't think I'll do a video on it because it's not going to be that important, but we'll likely talk about it on the Aficionados, or perhaps Doc and I will talk about it on the Patreon or whatever. So that's one of the 3 or 4 projects that's been announced. We also know what the other one is going to be. At least I have a really good idea based on what Tom Brevoort said in his Substack answering another question. I said that we'd be talking about Iceman by the end of the year, Hector, and we're still not even halfway to that point. So like many other X characters that fans are asking about, you're going to need to wait for the proper moment to arrive. I would say that means that Iceman is going to have a solo book, also along with Dazzler, Storm, and Phoenix. Iceman is not a solo character anymore, can't carry anything, can't carry water, can't carry ice, let alone his own comic book series. That character has just been destroyed by Brian Michael Bendis, Cena Grace, and now Steve Orlando. And there's just no staying power with the character. But I would imagine you're going to get an Iceman solo book or an Iceman-led team that'll be absolutely awful, that no one will want to read because he's such a damaged brand at this point. It's not even funny. They should probably just give up on the character because literally the only thing he does, for the most part, in an X-Men book nowadays is show up, remind people that he's gay, maybe kiss a dude, and then he freezes himself out of there. Even in his solo book, it was all about, I think the way I read it, I think Iceman is actually dead, and some dude named like Rico or something like that, like his love willed Iceman into existence, and he made him like his frozen sex doll or something weird. Man, that fucking Steve Orlando is he's a super nice guy, and everything I've ever heard about him is like he's a fucking great dude to talk to, really loves comic books, is just the friendliest dude in the world. But my goodness, he is a fucking train wreck as a comic book writer, especially at Marvel. Once he didn't have editorial oversight, that guy just exposed himself for what he is. A complete and utter hack. Fake comic books, as Tom Brevoort would like to call it, based on the words of Roger Stern in the past. So we will be getting a Dazzler book. I imagine we'll be getting a Iceman solo book announced in the not too distant future. We're going to have a Storm solo book. She's also going to be a team book within the Avengers because that fucking makes sense. And this X-Men line is so enormous and there's so much information. It's almost discombobulating at this time. But I will continue to endeavor to cover all this horseshit because that's what I do. This is what you guys asked me to do, and I will do my damnedest to keep on top of it. If you would like even more information about the X-Men and other Marvel projects and even DC Comics projects, and you haven't checked out Thinking Critical Patreon, I will say this. If you like what we're doing here on YouTube and you want to support us, if you go there are different tiers and we offer different kinds of podcasts. If you want to help support the channel and back us on Patreon, we want to get back to you in a big way so I get all the best guests from the channel that's there on a regular basis. We'd show up there and we just do podcast after podcast after podcast all week long. Obviously, depending on the tier that you end up supporting, we definitely appreciate the support. There's a link to Think Critical Patreon in the video description.